Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to wake up one day and realize Europe isn't green anymore? No forests, no rivers, no rolling fields, just sand. Spain? A scorching wasteland. Italy? Gone to dust. Paris? Buried under a sky the color of fire. It sounds impossible, like the plot of some apocalyptic novel you'd read on vacation and then forget about. But if the climate keeps shifting the way it is, this isn't science fiction. This is a future we could actually live through. At first, it wouldn't seem like a disaster. Summers would just feel a little longer, the air a little drier. Grass wouldn't grow quite as lush. Trees would lose their leaves earlier in the season. People would joke about global warming over iced coffees, unaware they were standing on the edge of something irreversible. But the warning signs would stack up. By year 10, farmers in southern Spain would see their fields turn to dust. The once fertile plains of Italy's Po Valley would produce half their usual harvest, then a quarter, then nothing. Vineyards in Bordeaux would wither. Olive groves in Greece would die, their ancient trees turning brittle and hollow. The Mediterranean would change too, its soft, salty breeze replaced by waves of furnace heat. Tourists who once flocked to the Amalfi Coast and Santorini would visit in early spring or not at all. Then the winds would change. Sahara winds, heavy with sand, would sweep across the Mediterranean and settle over Europe. These winds wouldn't just bring heat. They'd carry dust so thick it would coat windows, cars, and streets in a fine orange film. Every summer, wildfires would rip through southern forests, and eventually there'd be nothing left to burn. Without trees, the land would lose its anchor. Soil would dry, crack, and drift away, leaving behind bare rock and shifting dunes. The rivers would vanish next. The Danube, the Rhine, the Seine, these waterways have been the arteries of Europe for centuries, but without snow in the Alps and rainfall in the highlands, they'd shrink, then disappear. The Seine in Paris would become a dusty trench lined with abandoned cafes. The Danube's grand bridges would stretch over nothing but cracked earth. Without rivers, millions would lose their primary source of fresh water. Cities like Vienna, Budapest, and Cologne would ration water daily, restricting showers, cooking, even drinking. Farms would vanish entirely. And when the water and food are gone, people leave. At first, it would be the farmers, the small-town families, the people living closest to the land. Then, as the heat became unbearable, city dwellers would follow. By the time the migration peaked, millions would head north, to Sweden, Norway, Finland, the UK, and Iceland. Northern cities would explode in size, their populations doubling or tripling in just a few decades. Streets built for quiet Scandinavian towns would become packed, languages would mix in a single sentence, and southern traditions would survive only in diaspora communities. But the South would turn silent. Rome's fountains would be dry, the Spanish steppes buried in sand. The Colosseum would stand under a permanent orange haze, its stones slowly eroding. The Eiffel Tower would loom over dunes instead of boulevards. Venice's canals would be nothing but cracked trenches winding through ghostly stone corridors. Tourists wouldn't come anymore, not because they didn't want to, but because there'd be nothing to see but ruins. Life in this new desert Europe would be alien. Temperatures could hit 50 degrees Celsius in summer. Dust storms would turn midday into night, forcing people indoors for days at a time. Crops wouldn't survive without massive technological intervention. Cities that remained would live underground or in sealed, climate-controlled structures. Solar farms would dominate the landscape, feeding desalination plants to turn seawater into drinking water. Fresh produce would become a luxury item, imported from distant countries that still had fertile land. Wildlife would be nearly gone. The deer, foxes, and wolves of Europe's forests would vanish. Migratory birds would stop returning. Insects would dominate: beetles, ants, and heat-tolerant locusts. Only the most resilient species would adapt to the scorching climate. The economy would shift entirely. Southern Europe would produce nothing but solar power and survival tech. Northern Europe would bear the burden of feeding the entire continent, heavily dependent on international trade. Shipping routes would shift toward the Arctic as melting ice opened new paths. Political tensions over resources would rise, and the concept of a united Europe could fracture under the weight of scarcity. Generations born in this desert world wouldn't remember the green. They'd grow up thinking stories of snow in the Alps or autumn leaves in Germany were fairy tales. A photograph of Paris in springtime, flowers blooming along the Seine, would seem as impossible as a picture of dinosaurs walking the earth. And the strangest part? This isn't just a hypothetical. Southern Spain is already experiencing desertification. Glaciers in the Alps are disappearing at record speed. The Po River in Italy has hit historically low water levels. Every year, the border between what we call possible and what we call probable moves closer. Turning an entire continent into a desert isn't just a thought experiment. The signs of climate change are already here: heat waves, droughts, shifting weather patterns. If we don't act, this what if could turn into what's next. So, if you woke up tomorrow and saw your hometown turning to dust, what would you do?